What happened in Dublin this week may eventually be remembered as one of those diplomatic moments that looked ordinary in real time but proved historic in hindsight. On the surface, it was a state visit, a few handshakes, a bilateral agreement, a formal dinner inside Dublin Castle, another routine stop on a Prime Minister's overseas schedule. But beneath the ceremonial photographs lies something potentially much larger, a signal that Canada is accelerating a strategic shift away from overwhelming dependence on the United States and toward a broader network of European economic and security partnerships. And if that interpretation is correct, then the consequences could extend far beyond Ireland. The timing is not accidental, timing is everything in geopolitics. For nearly 2 years, Canada has faced increasing economic uncertainty from recurring trade disputes, tariff threats, and political tensions with Washington. Lumber, steel, electric vehicles, critical minerals, agriculture, few sectors have escaped the shadow of trade friction. Against that backdrop, Mark Carney's visit to Ireland becomes more than a diplomatic courtesy call. The reported $2 billion cooperation framework focuses on 3 strategic sectors: pharmaceuticals, artificial intelligence, food security. At first glance, these seem like unrelated industries. They are not. These are 3 sectors that governments increasingly view as national security assets. Pharmaceuticals determine health resilience. Artificial intelligence determines technological competitiveness. Food security determines political stability. Nations that lose control over these sectors often discover that economic dependence eventually becomes political dependence. Canada appears determined not to learn that lesson the hard way. Dublin was not the beginning. One of the most overlooked aspects of the trip is that Dublin was actually the second act. Before Ireland came Paris. Before the economic announcements came security announcements. Before trade came strategy. According to the material surrounding the visit, Canada positioned itself as a founding participant in a new defense financing institution associated with European security initiatives. That development matters enormously. Most countries focus on participating in systems. Very few get an opportunity to help design them. The difference is profound. Participants follow rules, architects write them. If Canada successfully secures a meaningful role inside emerging European defense financing structures, it gains something far more valuable than a short-term trade contract. It gains influence, and influence tends to outlast governments. Why Europe matters more than ever. For decades, Canada's economic geography appeared almost predetermined. The United States was the obvious market, the easiest market, the closest market, the largest market. More than 3/4 of Canadian merchandise exports continue to flow south. That relationship created enormous prosperity, but it also created vulnerability. The pandemic exposed that vulnerability. Supply chain disruptions exposed it. Export restrictions exposed it. Trade disputes exposed it. The reality is simple. When one customer represents most of your business, that customer possesses leverage. The customer may never use it, but they possess it, and once leverage exists, governments must account for it. This is the strategic context behind Canada's European outreach. The objective is not necessarily replacing America. That is unrealistic. The objective is creating alternatives. Alternatives change negotiations. Alternatives create flexibility. Alternatives reduce vulnerability. The pharmaceutical angle could be the biggest story. The most important component of the Dublin Agreement may not be AI, it may not be food security, it may be pharmaceuticals. Ireland occupies a unique position within the global pharmaceutical ecosystem. Many of the world's largest drug manufacturers operate major European facilities there. That makes Ireland one of the most strategically important pharmaceutical hubs in the Western world. Why does that matter for Canada? Because supply chains become visible only when they fail. When medicine is available, nobody thinks about supply chains. When shelves are empty, everyone thinks about supply chains. Canada learned during the pandemic that depending too heavily on a single source of critical goods can become a national weakness. Building stronger links into Europe's pharmaceutical network creates redundancy, and redundancy is resilience. In national security planning, resilience is often worth more than efficiency. The Carney factor, politics, is often about institutions. Diplomacy is often about people. One fascinating element of this story is Carney's personal connection to Ireland. His family roots trace back to County Mayo. For many observers, this may seem like a symbolic detail. In diplomacy, symbolism matters. Relationships matter. Trust matters. Shared history matters. Countries frequently sign agreements because economic interests align. But agreements move faster when personal credibility already exists. Political scientists often underestimate the role of human relationships in international affairs. Economic models cannot measure trust, yet trust regularly determines whether deals happen. The hidden message. To Washington. This is where the story becomes truly interesting. The most significant audience for the Dublin visit may not have been Ireland. It may have been the United States. Because every diplomatic trip sends two messages, the public message and the strategic message. The public message is partnership. The strategic message is optionality. Canada appears to be communicating something increasingly clear. We have alternatives, not complete alternatives, not replacement markets, but alternatives. That distinction matters. Countries negotiate differently when they possess alternatives. Businesses negotiate differently when they possess alternatives. Individuals negotiate differently when they possess alternatives. Leverage changes the moment credible alternatives emerge. History suggests this strategy can work. Canada is not the first nation to attempt this approach. Mexico pursued diversification during periods of trade uncertainty with the United States. Australia accelerated diversification after experiencing severe economic pressure from China. Neither country fully escaped dependence on major trading partners. That was never the goal. The goal was reducing dependence. There is a difference. Australia still trades with China. Mexico still trades heavily with the United States. But both countries now possess broader economic options than they previously had, and broader options generally translate into greater negotiating strength. Canada appears to be following a similar playbook. The difference is that Canada is attempting to build not only trade routes but institutions. That makes the strategy potentially more durable. The risks are real. However, there is another side to this story. Diversification sounds attractive. Implementation is difficult. European markets cannot instantly replace American markets. Supply chains require years to build. Regulatory frameworks take time. Business relationships take time. Infrastructure takes time. Most importantly, small and medium-sized businesses often struggle to access international markets at the same scale as large corporations. That means the benefits may arrive unevenly. Large exporters often move first. Smaller firms frequently follow much later. If diversification remains concentrated among major corporations, Canada may discover that the architecture exists without producing transformational change. That is a genuine risk. The next 12 months could be decisive. The coming year may determine whether this strategy becomes historic or merely symbolic. Several developments will be worth watching. Progress on Canada-EU economic integration. Expansion of pharmaceutical cooperation, growth in Canadian exports outside the United States, development of European defense financing institutions. The next major Canada-US trade negotiations, outcomes from upcoming G7 discussions. Together, these indicators will reveal whether Canada's European strategy is producing measurable results or simply generating headlines. Final analysis. When historians examine major geopolitical shifts, they rarely begin with dramatic moments. They begin with small moments that later proved important. A treaty, a meeting, a visit, a framework agreement, a conversation between leaders. The Dublin visit may ultimately be remembered as one of those moments. Not because of the $2 billion headline, not because of the state dinner, not because of the photographs, but because it may represent the point at which Canada stopped thinking primarily about protecting an existing economic relationship and started actively constructing alternatives. Whether that strategy succeeds remains uncertain. Whether it carries risks is beyond question. But one thing appears increasingly clear: Canada is no longer pursuing diversification as a theoretical policy objective. It is attempting to build it into the architecture of its future. And if that architecture holds, the balance of power in North American trade negotiations may look very different a decade from now.